They maintained, however, that the sum total of their offense or error amounted to no more than this, that it was their habit to assemble before daylight on a fixed day and to sing responsively a song to Christ as to a god, and that they bound themselves by an oath, Sacramentum, not for any criminal purpose, which is what he suspected, I guess, but on the contrary, that they would not commit theft or robbery or adultery, break their word, or deny a deposit of trust money when called upon to restore it.
Very good. So that's interesting, and thank you for pointing out that the Latin word there is sacramentum. I think this is really significant when it comes to Christian worship and the study of Christian worship in the ancient church. Sacramentum, from which we get the word sacrament, was a secular term, and that referred to a solemn oath, especially the oath of allegiance that a soldier would take upon entering military service. When the soldier made his oath, he would present a gift as a token of his allegiance, a visible sign that signified and confirmed his oath of allegiance. So sacramentum was the oath itself, but also by extension, it was the sign that signified the oath. Now, around the year 211 AD, Tertullian, who is the earliest Latin theologian, he's the earliest Christian theologian who left us a sizable collection of treatises in Latin. Tertullian, in a treatise entitled De Corona, which means on the crown, referring to the military crown, uses the word sacramentum to refer to Christian baptism. Now, Tertullian argues that the believer is a soldier of Christ and that his allegiance to Christ is symbolized in the sacramentum of baptism, just as a secular soldier's allegiance to his commander is symbolized by a sacramentum when he takes his military oath. Now, that's how the term sacrament entered the Christian tradition, primarily in the West, primarily through the writings of Tertullian. Tertullian, at least, is the one who made it popular. He popularized the term.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting that Tertullian was using the same language of Pliny that was 100 years earlier. 100 years earlier, Pliny is using the word sacramentum to describe something the Christians were doing in worship. And he heard it from the apostates, at least one of whom defected from the faith around 92 AD. So that's how ancient the word is. So, Pliny,
Tertullian cited Pliny too, correct?
Yeah, that's right. In the Apology, I believe it's chapter 2 of the Apology. So, Pliny published his letters. So the letters of Pliny were known to many others in Tertullian's day, and they were known to Tertullian. And he cites this letter that Pliny writes to Trajan. And so he sees, of course, the use of the word sacramentum to describe the liturgical customs. One of the acts of Christian worship was at least described by Pliny, if not by the apostates who were informing Pliny of what happened, as a sacrament, a sacramentum. Now, what exactly did they mean? I think they probably meant the oath of allegiance that they would take upon entering into the church.
Like their public profession of faith.
Right. Their profession of faith. Right. And there are a couple of reasons why I think that that's the case. That's the most plausible explanation anyhow. Whenever converts to Christianity would make their profession of faith, they would take a vow, a baptismal vow, to live according to the way of life, the Christian life. And Cabanas, whom I cited earlier, Alan Cabanas, says the following: the oath not to commit certain crimes or vices is quite consonant with what we know of New Testament catechesis. In fact, the listing that you see in Pliny reads very much like the latter part of the Decalogue as cited in the New Testament: not to steal, commit adultery, or bear false witness, or practice fraud. Now, the list of vices is close enough to the Decalogue that some scholars think the sacramentum is the recitation of the Decalogue. which Christians would have recited and worshiped, taking over the practice from the liturgical customs of the synagogue, the Jewish liturgy of the synagogue. But I think a more plausible explanation is that it's the baptismal vow, which would include an oath to follow the way of life. Before baptism, the candidate pledged himself to the Christian life. And the clearest example of that we have from the ancient churches in the Didache. The first six chapters of the Didache spells out the way of life in contrast to the way of death. And prior to the Christian receiving baptism, which is in chapter 7 of the Didache, it tells us in chapter 7, verse 1 of the Didache, that having gone over all these things, in other words, having catechized the candidate for baptism concerning the way of life, then baptize him in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So catechesis would have preceded baptism. Now, if it is a reference to the baptismal vow, then that tells us that Christians already by the early 2nd century or late 1st century were using the word sacramentum to refer to the baptismal vow. And that word later became a name for the whole baptismal action, right? The part for the whole. It's just by extension applied to the whole action of baptism.
Kind of like a synecdoche, like
yes,
a hired hand,
mm-hmm.
or heads of cattle.
Toto.
Yeah.